a skeptical mogul, doubted deep connections. She, a young barista, fluent in American Sign Language and with rare empathy. In a coffee shop, Diego watches her translate for a deaf man, calming the situation. Shocked, he sees the beauty of her gestures and the purity of her soul. The CEO falls for her gentle spirit. Before we begin the story, leave a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The winter sun in Chicago filtered through the enormous windows of the 40th floor, casting long shadows across Diego Castellani's impeccable office. At 40 years old, he had built an empire that started in a small apartment in Lincoln Park and now spanned 3 continents. His hands moved across the tablet with the same precision as a pianist playing a complex sonata, analyzing financial reports that would decide the fate of thousands of jobs. Castellani Tech wasn't just a software development company. It was his life, his identity, his fortress. Every line of code approved, every contract signed, every strategic decision passed through his critical eyes. Diego had learned early on that trusting people too much was a luxury that men like him couldn't afford. His path was paved with relationships that turned out to be self-serving, friendships that fell apart when money was at stake, and a marriage that ended when he discovered his ex-wife was more in love with his bank account than with him. The intercom buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Castellani, the meeting with the Japanese investors has been rescheduled for Thursday," announced Marina, his assistant of 8 years, one of the few people he still trusted. Mainly because she had known him before the fortune and never asked for anything beyond her fair salary. "Thank you, Marina." His voice was controlled, professional as always. Diego had perfected the art of keeping a safe distance from everyone, including himself. It was almost 2 in the afternoon when he decided to do something unusual, leave the office for lunch. Normally, Marina ordered sushi or Italian, and he ate while reviewing contracts. But that day, an inexplicable restlessness pushed him out of his comfort zone. Maybe it was the fact that he had turned 40 the week before, or maybe the conversation with his therapist, who insisted he needed to reconnect with the real world. The elevator took him to the ground floor of the Castellani building, one of the first he had bought when the company began to thrive. On the ground floor was a small coffee shop that served the employees of the various offices in the building. Diego had never been inside. He knew of its existence only from the monthly revenue reports for the commercial space. Coffee & Co. was a stark contrast to the corporate environment of the upper floors. Plants hung from the ceiling, creating a welcoming and relaxed atmosphere. The aroma of freshly roasted coffee mingled with the sound of lively conversations and the hum of the espresso machine. Diego felt out of place in his tailored suit, like a penguin in a sunflower field. Behind the counter, a young woman was preparing cappuccinos with the skill of someone who had found her calling. Her brown hair was tied up in a casual bun, and she smiled genuinely at each customer, as if each order were the most important of the day. Diego estimated that she was about 28 years old, and there was something about her movements that intrigued him, a lightness he hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. "What can I get for you today?" she asked when it was his turn, and Diego realized he had been watching her for longer than he intended. "Double espresso," he replied automatically. "Great choice. Our beans are from a family farm in California. You'll taste notes of dark chocolate and a very subtle citrus finish." She spoke with genuine enthusiasm, as if she were presenting a work of art. Diego paid and sat at a discreet table in the corner from where he could observe the activity. He found himself studying the barista. He later read on her name tag that her name was Rafaela, and the way she interacted with each customer. It wasn't just professionalism. There was something deeper, a natural ability to make people feel seen and important. While savoring the coffee, which was indeed exceptional, Diego witnessed a small scene that made him question everything he believed about human nature. A man in his 50s approached the counter and began to make gestures with his hands, clearly trying to place an order. The other employee, a younger girl, was confused and began to speak louder, as if volume would solve the communication barrier. The situation was becoming awkward. Other customers began to stare, some impatiently. The deaf man seemed frustrated, and the young attendant was clearly panicking. That's when Rafaela approached. Diego watched, fascinated, as she greeted the man with fluid and elegant gestures. Her hands danced in the air with a grace that transformed communication into art. The man's face lit up immediately, and he responded with equally expressive gestures. Rafaela translated the order, a latte and a pastry, and continued to chat with him while preparing the drink. What impressed Diego most was not just her fluency in ASL, but the naturalness of the gesture. There was no drama, no seeking recognition. She simply saw someone who needed help and offered that help as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. When the man left, he made a gesture of gratitude that made Rafaela smile with a pure joy that Diego hadn't seen in years. "Sorry for the commotion, everyone," she said to the customers waiting in line, not seeming at all fazed by the incident. At that moment, something changed inside Diego. For the first time in years, he had witnessed an act of kindness completely disinterested. There were no cameras, no audience seeking applause. There was nothing to gain. Just one person helping another because it was the right thing to do. He finished his coffee slowly, unable to take his eyes off Rafaela. There was a light in her that he thought he had lost forever. The ability to see the best in people, to act with instinctive compassion, to find joy in simple gestures. When he finally got up to leave, Diego carried with him more than just the memory of a good coffee. He carried the first spark of hope he had felt in a long time. The possibility that perhaps there were still genuinely good people in the world. And one of them was only 40 floors away from his gilded solitude. Diego couldn't concentrate for the rest of the afternoon. Sitting in his Italian leather chair, with 3 screens displaying performance charts and sales reports, his mind kept returning to that coffee shop. To the way Rafaela had transformed a moment of awkwardness into human connection. To the simplicity of her kindness. For the first time in years, he left the office before 9 at night. The next day, Diego found an excuse to go down to the ground floor again. This time, he ordered a latte and watched Rafaela work. She greeted regular customers by name, remembered preferences, asked about children and jobs. It wasn't just service. It was genuine care. "You're new around here, aren't you?" she asked when it was his turn. "Yesterday was the first time I saw you." "I work in the building," Diego replied, surprised that she had noticed. He was used to being invisible in crowds, protected by his aura of power and detachment. "Oh, what floor?" Her eyes sparkled with sincere curiosity. 40th. "Wow! You must have an incredible view up there." There was no envy in her voice, only genuine admiration. "I always wonder what it must be like to see the whole city from so high." Diego was about to answer when a group of executives he recognized from previous meetings entered the coffee shop. Instinctively, he moved away from the counter, not wanting to be seen there. Not out of shame for the coffee shop, but because he didn't want his presence there to become the subject of corporate gossip. During the rest of the week, Diego developed a new routine. Every day at 2 in the afternoon, he went down for coffee. Gradually, he began to talk more with Rafaela. He discovered that she had studied English literature at Northwestern University, that she had been working there for 2 years while finishing a graduate degree in inclusive education, that on Saturdays she taught ASL at a community center in Uptown. "My younger brother was born deaf," she explained one day when Diego asked how she had learned sign language. "I grew up seeing how the world could be exclusive to him. I wanted to be part of the change." With each conversation, Diego felt more intrigued. Rafaela spoke about her dreams without bitterness for not having achieved them yet, about challenges without playing the victim, about other people with a generosity that he thought had been extinct from the human species. It was on a rainy Thursday in July that everything changed. Diego had gone down for his usual coffee when he found the coffee shop in a state of controlled chaos. Rafaela was behind the counter, clearly stressed, serving a line that stretched to the door. The other employee had called out sick, and she was alone during the busiest time. "Sorry for the wait, everyone," she said to the impatient line, trying to maintain a smile while operating two machines at the same time. Diego watched for a few minutes, seeing the frustration grow on the customers' faces. Some began to mutter, others to look at their watches with irritation. Rafaela was clearly overwhelmed, but continued to treat each person with the same courtesy. Even when an executive in a blue suit complained loudly about the incompetence of the establishment, without thinking twice, Diego went to the counter. "Can I help?" he asked softly to Rafaela. She looked at him in surprise. "Oh, you don't have to, thank you. It'll pass. I insist." There was a determination in his voice that she hadn't heard before. "What do I need to do?" Rafaela hesitated for a moment, then smiled with a gratitude that warmed something inside Diego's chest. "You could take the orders while I prepare?" And so, the CEO of a multinational company found himself behind the counter of a coffee shop, writing down orders on napkins and discovering that he had no idea of the difference between a macchiato and a mocha. Rafaela guided him with patience and humor, laughing gently when he confused raw sugar with brown sugar. "Double coffee with oat milk and a drop of vanilla." She repeated a complicated order, and Diego frowned, trying to memorize it. "Guys, he's doing the best he can," Rafaela said to an impatient customer, briefly touching Diego's arm in a gesture of support that made him feel like he could conquer the world. 40 minutes later, when the line finally dwindled, they were covered in coffee grounds and laughing at a joke about the art of frothing milk. Diego didn't remember the last time he had laughed like that, freely, genuinely, without calculating the implications of each gesture. "Thank you so much," said Rafaela, wiping her hands on her apron. "You saved my day. Actually, you saved my job." "It was a pleasure," replied Diego, and realized that it was true. He had found a simple joy in helping, in being useful in a way that didn't involve money or power. "Let me make your coffee," she offered. "On the house." As she prepared his drink, Diego watched her hands working with precision and care. Each movement was intentional, careful. She was making art in the milk, creating a small heart in the foam. "Ready?" she said, handing him the cup. "Thank you so much. I don't know how I would have managed without you." When their fingers touched in the exchange of the cup, Diego felt an electricity that he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just physical attraction. It was recognition, connection, the feeling of having found someone who saw the world with the same eyes that he would like to have. "Rafaela," he said without planning the words, "would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow?" The question came out before he could filter it through his usual caution. Rafaela looked at him in surprise, and for a moment Diego feared he had misread the signs, had confused kindness with interest. She hesitated, and Diego saw a conflict passing through her eyes. "Are you sure? I mean, we barely know each other, and I'm just—" "You're extraordinary," he interrupted, with an honesty that surprised him. "And I would really like to get to know you better." Rafaela bit her lip, clearly torn between wanting to say yes and some kind of apprehension that Diego couldn't identify. "Okay," she said finally, with a shy smile that lit up her whole face. "But somewhere simple, okay? I'm not the fancy restaurant type." "I know a perfect place," Diego replied, already knowing exactly where he would take her. A small Italian restaurant in Little Italy that he had discovered in his college days and never visited again. When he left the coffee shop that afternoon, Diego carried more than an accepted invitation. He carried the first real possibility of genuine connection that he had felt in more than a decade, and the certainty that his carefully controlled life was about to change in ways he couldn't even imagine yet. La Nonna's restaurant was on a narrow street in Little Italy, hidden between a pawn shop and an auto repair shop. Diego arrived first, choosing a discreet table in the back of the room. His hands trembled slightly, something that didn't happen even in the most tense meetings with investors. He had spent the entire morning choosing clothes, finally opting for a light blue dress shirt and jeans in an attempt to seem less intimidating. When Rafaela appeared at the door, looking for him with her eyes, Diego felt the air escape his lungs. She wore a simple floral cotton dress and sandals, her hair loose framing her face. There were no expensive jewels or elaborate makeup, but she radiated a natural beauty that eclipsed any woman he had ever known. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sitting down across from him. "The bus was delayed. Don't worry. Did you order something to drink?" They ordered house red wine and an antipasto platter, and Diego found that talking to Rafaela was surprisingly easy. She asked questions about his work with genuine curiosity, without the hidden agenda that he was used to encountering on dates. "It must be amazing to create something from scratch and see it grow," she said when he explained how he had founded the company. "How many people work with you now?" "About 2,000, spread across several countries." Her eyes widened. "Wow, you're responsible for the livelihood of 2,000 families. What a huge responsibility." Diego was surprised by her perspective. Most people commented on the money, the power, the prestige. Rafaela saw people, impact, human responsibility. "And you?" he asked. "Tell me about your plans." "You're finishing your graduate degree in inclusive education." Rafaela's face lit up. "I want to open a language school that offers ASL as a first language, not as a special course. A place where deaf and hearing people learn together from a young age, where inclusion is natural, not forced." "Have you thought about how you're going to finance that?" "I'm saving money slowly. Maybe get a loan, look for investors who believe in the project." She shrugged with a naturalness that concealed years of careful planning. "It will take time, but it will happen." The conviction in her voice touched something deep in Diego. There was a purity in her dreams that reminded him of himself at 25, when he believed he could change the world through technology. "I can help," he said impulsively. Rafaela frowned. "What do you mean?" "Finance the project, or connect you with the right people. I have contacts in education, investors who are interested in social causes." Rafaela's expression changed subtly. A shadow passed through her eyes, and she recoiled slightly in her chair. "That's very kind of you, but I can't accept." "Why not?" "Because we barely know each other. And because I need to achieve this on my own." There was a firmness in her voice that Diego recognized, the same determination that he himself had had when he refused his father's help to expand the company. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to be presumptuous. It's just that when I see something good, I want to support it." Rafaela relaxed a little. "Thank you. But I prefer to build my path step by step." The rest of the dinner took place in safer territory: books, movies, childhood stories. Diego discovered that Rafaela had grown up in a small house in the South Side with 3 siblings, that her mother worked as a cleaner in 3 different jobs to support the family after her father abandoned them. "It must have been difficult," he commented. "It was, but my mother always said that difficulties pass, character remains. She taught us that it doesn't matter where you come from, it matters where you're going." Wise woman, the wisest I know. She worked her whole life so that we could study. My 3 siblings are in college now, law, engineering, and medicine. I'm the only one who hasn't finished studying yet, but you're finishing and building something important. Rafaela smiled, and Diego realized that it was the first time someone had validated her sacrifices without trying to minimize them or compare them with other achievements. When it was time to leave, Diego insisted on taking her home. Rafaela hesitated before accepting, and he understood that she was assessing whether she could trust him. The drive to the South Side took almost an hour in Friday traffic. Diego drove his BMW through the outer neighborhoods, seeing a Chicago that he rarely visited: small houses crammed together, unpaved streets, children playing on the sidewalk even in the cold of July. "It's here," said Rafaela when they arrived at a 2-story house painted light blue. Diego turned off the engine, and they stayed in the car for a few minutes, talking about the night. "Thank you for dinner," she said, "and for the conversation. It's been a while since I've found someone who really listens. Thank you. You made me remember things I had forgotten." "Like what?" "Like how good it is to dream about something beyond numbers and profits." Rafaela studied him for a moment, as if she were trying to decipher something on his face. "Diego, can I be direct?" "Sure. You seem like a very lonely person, and I don't know if I'm ready to be the solution to someone's loneliness." Her honesty hit him like a punch in the chest. But instead of being offended, he admired her courage. "You're right," he admitted. "I am lonely, but I'm not looking for a quick fix. I'm looking for a real connection. And how do I know you won't get tired of me when the novelty wears off?" The question revealed a vulnerability that she had hidden throughout the evening. Diego understood that behind the confidence and determination, Rafaela also had fears. Fear of not being enough, of being discarded, of getting hurt. "You don't know," he replied with brutal honesty. "And I don't know either, but I'd like the chance to find out." Rafaela was silent for a long moment, looking out the window at her house. "Okay," she said finally, "but slowly, okay? I'm not the type to jump in head first." "Slowly," he agreed. When she got out of the car and waved from the front door, Diego remained standing on the street for a few minutes, processing the night. For the first time in years, he had been completely honest with someone about his loneliness. And instead of running away or trying to take advantage, Rafaela had offered understanding and a cautious chance. On the way back to his apartment in the Gold Coast, Diego felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Genuine hope that maybe he could build something real with someone who saw him beyond his bank account. During the following 3 weeks, Diego and Rafaela developed a delicate routine. He continued to go down for coffee every afternoon, and they went out to dinner twice a week, always in simple places she chose. Diego discovered small, family-run restaurants, diners with home-style cooking, a pizza place where the owner knew all the customers by name. It was a completely different world from his, and he was surprised to realize how at home he felt there. Rafaela, in turn, began to relax in his company. Their conversations became more intimate, more revealing. She told him about the father who had abandoned them when he found out about his youngest son's deafness, about the nights she spent studying by candlelight when the electricity bill was cut off, about the dreams she cultivated in silence so as not to disappoint her mother if she couldn't achieve them. Diego spoke about his own loneliness, about how success had become a gilded cage, about the years in which he confused professional achievements with happiness. For the first time, someone listened to his vulnerabilities without judgment or attempted exploitation. It was on a rainy Tuesday in August that everything began to fall apart. Diego was in his boardroom, closing a $5 million deal with a telecommunications company when Marina entered with a worried expression. "Mr. Castellani, I need to speak with you. It's urgent." He paused the meeting and followed Marina to her office.
"What happened?"
Marina hesitated, holding a tablet. "There's an article on the TechWire website about you and, well, about the coffee shop girl." Diego's blood ran cold. He took the tablet and read the headline, "Millionaire CEO in romance with employee, favoritism or true love." The article was accompanied by photos. Diego and Rafaela leaving La Nonna, him opening the car door for her, the two of them walking down the street holding hands. The images had been taken without them noticing, probably by some freelance paparazzi looking for a story. The text was even worse than the photos. Sources close to Castellani Tech confirmed that CEO Diego Castellani, known for his discretion in personal matters, is romantically involved with Rafaela Silva, an employee of the coffee shop located on the ground floor of one of his buildings. The relationship raises questions about possible favoritism, since Silva works in commercial space owned by Castellani. Colleagues of the young woman report recent changes in her behavior, including frequent conversations with someone important and comments about new opportunities. Castellani's press office has not responded to our requests for clarification. Diego felt nausea rising in his throat, not only because of the invasion of privacy, but because of the way the article insinuated that Rafaela was a gold digger, that she was taking advantage of the situation. "Who leaked this?" he asked, although he already knew that there would be no definitive answer. We don't know. But sir, this is spreading quickly. It's already been republished on 3 other sites, and it's starting to circulate on social media. Diego's phone vibrated. It was a message from Rafaela. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. He cancelled the rest of the day's meetings and ran to the coffee shop. He found Rafaela in the back storage room, clearly shaken. Her eyes were red, and she was holding her cell phone with trembling hands. Did you see it? She asked without preamble. I saw it. Rafaela, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were following us. It's not just the article, she said, showing him her cell phone. I'm getting messages all day long. People I don't even know calling me a gold digger, scammer, money grabber. Diego took the phone and read some of the messages. They were cruel, full of class prejudice and misogyny. People judging Rafaela without knowing her, reducing her to visual stereotypes. There's more, she continued, her voice breaking. My boss received a call from the building management. They're questioning whether it's appropriate for me to continue working here, since it could create a conflict of interest. That's ridiculous. I'll fix it. How? Her eyes sparkled with restrained tears. Are you going to call your own company and say they can't fire me because we're dating? That's just gonna make everything worse. Diego realized the impossible dilemma they were trapped in. Any intervention of his would be seen as confirmation of the suspicions about favoritism. And there's one more thing, said Rafaela, taking a deep breath. My mother called me. She's worried. The neighbors are commenting, saying that I got involved with rich people and that this can only cause problems. Doesn't your mother trust you? She knows me. She knows I'm not a gold digger, but she also knows how the world works. She's afraid I'll get hurt. Diego felt the weight of responsibility falling on his shoulders. His presence in Rafaela's life was causing exactly the kind of complication she didn't deserve. Rafaela, I'm going to give an interview. I'm going to clarify everything, explain how we met, that there's no favoritism involved. No. The firmness in her voice surprised him. That's just going to draw more attention. It's only going to make it worse. Then what do you want to do? She was silent for a long moment, looking at her hands. I need some time, she said finally. To think, to let things cool down. Time for how long? I don't know. Maybe it's better if we stop seeing each other for a while. The words hit Diego like a bullet to the chest. Are you breaking up with me? I'm trying to protect both of us. Your reputation, my job, my family. This got too big too fast. But Rafaela, you can't let them speak for you. Let them decide what you can and cannot do. Easy to say when you have the power to defend yourself. I'm just a barista from the South Side. If this continues, I'm going to lose my job, my college, everything I've worked for. Diego saw the real fear in her eyes and understood that it wasn't just about the two of them. It was about the brutal reality of social differences, about how the world judged women like Rafaela when they got involved with men like him. I understand, he said, although each word cost a part of his soul. But I don't want to give up on us. I don't want to either, she admitted, and a tear finally rolled down her face. But maybe wanting isn't enough. When Diego left the coffee shop that afternoon, he carried with him the bitter certainty that the outside world had invaded his small haven of happiness and destroyed it. For the first time in weeks, he questioned whether he had been selfish in insisting on a relationship that perhaps was doomed to failure from the start. The loneliness that he had begun to heal returned with redoubled force, bringing with it the painful awareness that some barriers were perhaps impossible to overcome, no matter how much love there was on one side and the other. 2 weeks passed without Diego going down to the ground floor. He returned to his previous routine, lunches ordered by Marina, meetings that stretched late, the familiar solitude of his empty apartment. But now the loneliness tasted bitter because he knew what he was missing. Articles about the controversial romance continued to appear sporadically, speculating about the end of the relationship, analyzing every move Diego made at public events in search of signs of a new companion. He stopped reading the news, but Marina kept him informed about the most relevant ones for the company's image. It was one morning in September that Marina entered his office with a different expression. Not worried as she had been in recent weeks, but cautiously hopeful. "Mr. Castellani, there's a person here wanting to speak with you. Says it's about Rafaela." Diego's heart leaped. "Rafaela is here?" "No, sir. It's an older lady. Says she's her mother." Diego was paralyzed for a moment. Mrs. Carmen Silva, Rafaela had talked about her countless times, always with a mixture of deep love and admiration. The woman who had raised 4 children alone, who worked 3 jobs to keep them in school, who had never lost faith in the goodness of people despite all the difficulties. "Send her in," he said, adjusting his tie nervously. Mrs. Carmen was smaller than he had imagined, a woman of about 50 years old, grey hair tied in a simple bun, wearing a well-pressed navy blue dress and flats. But there was a dignity in her posture that impressed Diego immediately. She looked around the luxurious office without intimidation, only with discreet curiosity. "Mr. Castellani," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Carmen Silva, Rafaela's mother. Mrs. Silva, it's a pleasure to meet you. Please sit down. Can I offer you something? Coffee, water?" "A little coffee would be nice, thank you." Diego asked Marina to bring coffee and waited for Mrs. Carmen to start the conversation. She studied him with intelligent and penetrating eyes, which were very reminiscent of her daughter's. "I came here because my daughter is suffering," she said bluntly when Marina left the room. "I'm also suffering, Mrs. Silva, but I respected her decision to step away. I know that. And that's precisely why I came to talk to you." She picked up the coffee cup and took a sip before continuing. "Rafaela doesn't know I'm here. In fact, she'd be furious if she knew. Why did you come then?" Mrs. Carmen sighed. "Because I've known my daughter for 28 years. I know when she's genuinely happy and when she's sacrificing herself for what she thinks is best for everyone. And what do you think about our relationship?" "At first I was worried," she admitted. "Rich men and poor women, that story usually doesn't have a happy ending for the woman. But then I saw how my daughter talked about you." "How did she talk about me?" "Like someone in love talks about their loved one. Not about the money, not about the power, not about the opportunities. About the way you laughed, the conversations you had, how you treated the people in the coffee shop." Mrs. Carmen's eyes softened. "She said you had helped when she was alone behind the counter, that you weren't ashamed to get your hands dirty. That told me more about your character than any news article." Diego felt a tightness in his chest. "So why is she pulling away?" "Because she's afraid. Afraid of not being good enough for your world. Afraid that people will always see her as a gold digger. Afraid of messing up your life." Mrs. Carmen paused. "And because she learned from a young age to protect the people she loves, even if it means sacrificing herself." "But I don't want her to sacrifice herself for me." "I know. And that's why I came here with a proposal." Diego leaned forward, intrigued. "On October 15th, next Saturday, the association where Rafaela volunteers is hosting a fundraising event. A fair to raise funds to buy new equipment for the ASL classes." Mrs. Carmen took a piece of paper out of her purse. "Here's the address." Diego took the paper, not understanding where she was going with this. "Rafaela will be there," continued Mrs. Carmen. "In fact, she's one of the main organizers. She'll be in her element, doing what she loves, surrounded by people who know and respect her. You want me to go there? Not just go. I want you to see who my daughter really is. Not the shy barista you met, but the passionate educator, the community leader, the woman who can unite different people around a common cause." Mrs. Carmen's eyes sparkled with maternal pride. "And I want the people in the community to see you too. Not as the powerful CEO from the newspapers, but as the man my daughter chose. Mrs. Carmen, I'm not sure if this will work. My presence might cause more problems, or it might show everyone, including my stubborn daughter, that you two have something real, something worth fighting for." She leaned forward. "Mr. Diego, can I be direct?" "Sure. My daughter has never brought any man home to meet the family. In 28 years, I've never seen her look at someone the way she looks at you when she talks about him. Mrs. Carmen's voice became softer. She's scared, but she's also in love. And sometimes, when someone we love is scared, we need to be brave for them. Diego was silent, processing the words of Rafaela's mother. There was a wisdom there that transcended degrees and corporate experiences. The wisdom of a woman who had navigated life with her heart always open, despite all the disappointments. "There's one more thing," said Mrs. Carmen, hesitating for the first time. "Rafaela's language school project. She hasn't given up on it. In fact, she's intensified her efforts. She's working double shifts, saving every penny, because she thinks that if she can achieve her dream alone, she'll prove that she deserves to be with someone like you." The revelation hit Diego like lightning. Rafaela hadn't pulled away out of disinterest or fear of commitment. She was trying to become worthy of him, fighting to build something of her own that she could offer as a counterpoint to the social disparity between them. "She doesn't need to prove anything," he said, emotional. "I know, you know, but she needs to figure that out on her own. And maybe, if you show up at the event, show support for her work without making a fuss, without trying to solve everything with money, maybe she'll understand that you love her for who she is, not for what she can become." When Mrs. Carmen left the office, Diego was alone with the paper in his hand and a spark of hope that he hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, he had a plan, not to win Rafaela back, but to show her that some loves were strong enough to weather any storm. Saturday, October 15th dawned sunny, but Diego woke up with a knot in his stomach. He had spent the entire week planning his visit to the event, choosing clothes that didn't seem too ostentatious, rehearsing conversations that sounded natural. But now, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, he felt like a teenager about to ask the first girl to dance. He opted for dark jeans, white sneakers, and a navy blue polo shirt, the most casual he could get without looking like he was in costume. He drove to Uptown in his least conspicuous car, a Honda Civic he rarely used, and parked 2 blocks before the address Mrs. Carmen had given him. The Uptown Association for the Deaf occupied an old 2-story building, painted light yellow, with a simple sign at the entrance. Around it, colorful stalls spread across the sidewalk, and the street closed for the event. The sound of live music mixed with lively conversations and children's laughter. Diego stopped at the corner, observing from afar. There were more people than he expected. Entire families, young people, seniors, a vibrant mix of the local community. And then he saw her. Rafaela was at a stall in the center of the fair, organizing illustrated children's books about inclusion. She wore a white t-shirt with the association's logo and a long floral skirt, her hair tied in a high ponytail. She was talking animatedly with a girl of about 10 years old in ASL, her fluid and expressive gestures painting stories in the air. Diego's heart leaped. It was the first time he had seen her in 3 weeks, and the longing hit him with physical force. But more than that, he was seeing a side of her that he had never fully witnessed, Rafaela in her element, radiating confidence and purpose. He took a deep breath and began to walk towards the fair. He hadn't taken 10 steps when a familiar voice stopped him. Diego Castellani." He turned and found Robert Mendez, one of the biggest investors in Chicago, accompanied by his wife and 2 teenage children. "Robert, what a surprise," he managed to say, forcing a smile. "What are you doing here?" Robert's curiosity was evident, and Diego realized that other fairgoers were beginning to notice the conversation. "Supporting an important cause," he replied vaguely. "Ah, I see. Company philanthropic work. Very good for the image." Robert smiled with that expression that Diego knew well, that of someone who had just filed away useful information for future business conversations. Before Diego could respond, a second voice joined the conversation. "Robert, good to see you here." It was Marcelo Ferreira, editor-in-chief of TechWire, the same website that had published the article about his relationship with Rafaela. Diego's stomach sank. "Marcelo, you know Diego Castellani," said Robert, clearly pleased to be at the center of a potential news story. "Of course, I know him. In fact, I'm here doing a story about social inclusion in education. Marcelo's eyes gleamed with journalistic interest. But what an interesting coincidence that you're here too, Diego. Diego felt the world begin to crumble around him. In a few minutes, his presence there would be interpreted as a publicity stunt, an attempt to improve his image after the scandal. Worse still, Rafaela would again be dragged into the spotlight as the motivation behind his presence. "Excuse me," he murmured, trying to walk away, but Marcelo followed him. "Diego, a quick question. Does your presence here have any relation to Rafaela Silva? We heard she's a volunteer with this association. It was like taking a punch to the gut." Diego looked in the direction of Rafaela's stall and saw that she had stopped talking to the girl and was looking directly at him. Even from a distance, he could see the shock on her face quickly transforming into something that looked like panic. "No comment," said Diego, but it was already too late. Marcelo had followed his gaze and was now observing Rafaela with renewed interest. Robert had also located the source of the tension, and his expression changed to something between surprise and malicious amusement. "That's her, isn't it?" whispered Robert. "The barista who caused all that commotion." Diego saw Rafaela quickly get up from the stall and start walking in the opposite direction, clearly trying to avoid a public confrontation. But Marcelo was already moving, his cell phone camera discreetly but strategically positioned. At that moment, Diego fully understood the dimension of his mistake. He had come there with the best intentions, following Mrs. Carmen's advice, believing that he could show his support discreetly. But he had been naive about his own visibility. A man like him couldn't move anonymously, especially not at community events where his presence would be automatically noticed and questioned. Worse still, he was about to destroy exactly what he had come to protect. Rafaela's event, her work at the association, her reputation in the community, everything would be tainted by the narrative that she was using her influence to attract important donors, or worse, that she was showing off her relationship with the CEO. He watched Rafaela disappear through a side door of the association building and knew that he had lost any chance of reconciliation. Not only had he disrespected her request for space, but he had brought exactly the kind of unwanted attention she most feared. "Diego," Marcelo's voice sounded too close. "Could you comment on—" "No," said Diego with a firmness that made the journalist back down. "And if you publish anything about my presence here or about the organization of this event, you'll hear from my lawyers." But even as he uttered the threat, Diego knew it was useless. The story was already written. CEO stalks ex-girlfriend at charity event or something similar would be online before the end of the day. He walked back to his car with heavy steps, feeling the curious gazes of the fairgoers. In his attempt to win back Rafaela, he had only managed to confirm her worst fears about the two incompatible worlds they lived in. Sitting in the driver's seat with his hands trembling slightly, Diego faced a devastating truth. Maybe some differences were simply insurmountable. Maybe his love for Rafaela, however genuine it was, wasn't enough to overcome the brutal realities of social disparity and the media attention that his life inevitably attracted. For the first time since he had met Rafaela, Diego seriously considered the possibility of giving up. Not because he didn't love her, but because maybe loving her meant leaving her alone, away from the media circus that his presence always brought with it. The bitter taste of defeat was something he hadn't experienced in years, and now he understood why he had built so many barriers around his heart. Some pains were simply too devastating to be endured more than once in a lifetime. The article was published on Sunday morning. CEO crashes charity event in attempt to win back ex-girlfriend, read the headline, accompanied by photos of Diego arriving at the event and Rafaela fleeing through the side door. The text speculated about emotional harassment and use of economic power to pressure relationships. Diego read the article 3 times, each word like a blade. He cancelled all his appointments for Monday and locked himself in the apartment, ignoring the insistent calls from Marina and the press office. For the first time in his career, he simply couldn't think of corporate strategies or damage control. It was Mrs. Carmen who broke his isolation on Tuesday night, showing up at the front desk of his building. "Can I come up?" she asked through the intercom, and Diego, surprised, authorized her entry. She arrived at the apartment carrying a Tupperware container and a determined expression that was very reminiscent of her daughter's. "You look like you haven't eaten in days," she said, heading straight to the kitchen as if she had known the place for years. "Mrs. Carmen, I ruined everything," said Diego, sitting heavily on the sofa. "I did exactly what she was afraid I would do." "You did indeed," she agreed, taking plates out of the cabinet. "But not for the reasons you're thinking." "What do you mean?" "My daughter isn't angry because you showed up at the event. She's angry because you gave up." Diego looked at her confused. "I didn't give up. I left there to protect her. And then what? Disappeared for 3 days, didn't answer calls, left her with no explanation." Mrs. Carmen placed a plate of hot food on the coffee table. "Rafaela isn't a child who needs to be protected, Diego. She's a woman who needs a partner who fights alongside her, not someone who runs at the first sign of difficulty. But I only made things worse. The press, the comments on social media. So what?" Mrs. Carmen's voice gained strength. "Do you think my daughter got where she is by running away from difficulties? That she became who she is by giving up when things got tough?" Diego was silent, processing her words. "You know what she told me yesterday?" continued Mrs. Carmen. "That maybe she was wrong about you. That maybe you were just like all the other rich men, interested only as long as the game was fun, but unable to face real problems." The words hit Diego like a slap. "She said that?" "And there's more. She's thinking about accepting a job offer in Madison, Wisconsin. An NGO there offered her a position as a pedagogical coordinator to develop inclusion programs in public schools." Diego's heart leaped. "When is she leaving?" "If she goes, it will be at the end of the month." "But she hasn't decided yet." Mrs. Carmen sat down next to him. "Diego, my daughter is running away. And you know why? Because for the first time in her life, she found something worth fighting for. But she doesn't believe that the fight is reciprocated." "She's wrong." "Then prove it." "How?" "Every time I get close, I become a newspaper headline. Every time I try to help, I seem patronizing. Every time I show interest, she becomes the target of criticism." Mrs. Carmen smiled for the first time since she had arrived. "You know what your mistake was on Saturday?" "Going to the event?" "No, the mistake was going alone." She leaned forward. "You went there as CEO Diego Castellani, making a public appearance. You didn't go as Rafaela's boyfriend, supporting the woman he loves." "I don't understand the difference." "The difference is that a CEO can be ignored or attacked. But a man in love, fighting publicly for the woman he loves, that's a different story." Mrs. Carmen paused. "You know what my daughter's biggest fear is? That she's not good enough for my world." "No! Her biggest fear is that you're not brave enough for her world." The revelation hit Diego like lightning. For weeks, he had assumed that the problem was Rafaela feeling inadequate for his privileged life. But Mrs. Carmen was right. The problem was him, not having proven that he was strong enough to face the challenges that come with loving someone from a different world. "What should I do?" "Stop trying to protect her and start fighting for her." Publicly, clearly, without shame or hesitation, Mrs. Carmen got up. "And do it soon, because my daughter is proud. If she accepts that offer in Madison, it will be because she decided that it's not worth waiting for someone who doesn't have the courage to fight for her." After Mrs. Carmen left, Diego was alone with his thoughts and a clarity he hadn't felt in weeks. She was right. He had spent all this time trying to protect Rafaela from the consequences of being with him, when he should be fighting to create a space where they could be together without fear. On Wednesday morning, Diego called Marina with specific instructions. "I want a press conference for Friday. Invite all the major media outlets, and I want it to be broadcast live." "About what, sir?" "About my personal life." "And Marina?" "I'm going to need a special favor." He spent the next 2 days preparing meticulously, not as a CEO controlling a crisis, but as a man preparing for the most important battle of his life. A battle that he was finally ready to fight publicly, whatever the cost. On Thursday night, Diego made a call he hadn't made in months. "Dr. Silva?" he said when the familiar voice answered. "This is Diego Castellani. I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I need a favor. It's about your daughter, Rafaela." As he explained his situation to Rafaela's father, a man he had met briefly at academic events years before, Diego felt a determination growing inside him. For the first time since it all began, he wasn't reacting to events. He was taking control of the narrative. Friday's press conference would be his moment of truth. Not to save his reputation or manage a crisis, but to do something he had never done before. Bet everything on one person, publicly and without reservations. If Rafaela was questioning his courage, he was about to show her, and the whole world, exactly what he was capable of when he fought for something that really mattered. The press room at Castellani Tech was packed on Friday morning. Reporters from all the major outlets crowded in, cameras strategically positioned, anticipation palpable in the air. Diego had called a press conference about important personal matters, which had generated rampant speculation about possible announcements, from international expansion to corporate scandals. Diego entered the room at 10 o'clock sharp, wearing a navy blue suit, but with a different demeanor than usual. There was a vulnerability in his eyes that the experienced journalists immediately recognized. It wasn't the controlled posture of a CEO in damage control, but of a man about to open his heart. "Thank you for coming," he began, dismissing the podium and standing in front of the cameras. "I called this press conference to talk about something that has been distorted by the press in recent weeks. My relationship with Rafaela Silva." A murmur ran through the room. Marcelo Ferreira, from TechWire, leaned forward with renewed interest. "First, I want to clarify some facts. I met Rafaela by chance at a coffee shop in my building when I saw her helping a deaf customer. There was no favoritism, there's no conflict of interest, and there's no professional relationship between us." His voice gained strength. "What there is love, real love, deep love, and the kind that transforms a person." The cameras captured every word, every expression. In recent weeks, I've read articles speculating about her intentions, insinuating that she was a gold digger or opportunist. These people clearly don't know Rafaela Silva. Diego paused, letting emotion color his voice. Do they know a woman who works as a barista during the day, studies at night, and spends her weekends teaching ASL to children for free? Who saves every penny to fulfill her dream of opening an inclusive school? Who refused any help from me because she wants to achieve her own victories? He walked a few steps, and the cameras followed him. Rafaela taught me that there's a wealth that doesn't appear on financial statements. The wealth of compassion, of genuine generosity, of the ability to see the best in people even when they can't see it in themselves. His voice trembled slightly. She taught me that true strength isn't having power over others, but having the courage to be vulnerable with those we love. A journalist raised her hand. "Mr. Castellani, if you love each other so much, why aren't you together?" "Because I was a coward," he replied without hesitation. "Because when our relationship was exposed and she became the target of unfair criticism, I backed down. I thought that protecting her meant walking away. I was wrong." Diego turned directly to the main camera, knowing that Rafaela might be watching. "Rafaela, if you're seeing this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for running when I should have stayed by your side. I'm sorry for letting others define our story. And I'm sorry for almost losing the most extraordinary woman I've ever met because of my own fear." The room was in absolute silence. "You asked me once if I wouldn't get tired of you when the novelty wore off. The answer is no, because what I feel for you isn't novelty, it's recognition. It's like finding a part of myself that I didn't even know was lost." Diego took a deep breath before the final revelation. "And there's something else you need to know. Last night, I signed the papers to create the Rafaela Silva Foundation for Inclusive Education with an initial fund of $5 million. Not to impress her or win her back, but because I believe in her dream. Because I believe that a woman capable of transforming a simple coffee shop into a space of inclusion and kindness deserves to have her visions supported. The murmur in the room grew, but Diego raised his hand for silence. The foundation will be run by an independent board of educators, not by me. Rafaela doesn't need to accept me back for this to happen. This happens because she deserves it, regardless of anything between us. At that moment, the back door of the room opened. Diego turned and saw Rafaela enter, accompanied by Marina. She wore the same floral dress from their first date, her eyes shining with unshed tears. The entire room turned to look at her, cameras redirecting their focus. Rafaela walked slowly to Diego, and he saw on her face a mixture of surprise, emotion, and something that looked a lot like pride. "You're an idiot," she said loud enough for the microphones to pick up, and nervous laughter echoed through the room. "I know," replied Diego, smiling for the first time in weeks. "A brave idiot, but still an idiot." She came closer. "Did you really think I was going to leave for Madison without giving you a chance to fight for us? You knew about the offer? My mother told me everything, including about the conversation you had." Rafaela looked around the room full of journalists and cameras. "She also told me that you called my father yesterday, asking for his blessing to marry me." An astonished silence took over the room. Diego felt his face flush. "I wanted to do things right," he murmured, "in front of the entire Chicago press corps." She laughed, and the sound filled his heart with joy. "If that's what it takes to prove that I'm not ashamed to love you, then yes." Rafaela stood on tiptoe and kissed him softly, as flashes fired and cameras recorded. When they broke apart, she whispered only to him, "The answer is yes, by the way. To everything, to stay, to fight, to build something together, and to marry me." Mostly to that. 6 months later, Diego and Rafaela were married in a simple ceremony at the same association where it had almost all ended. The first school of the Rafaela Silva Foundation opened its doors the following year, offering bilingual education in English and ASL for children of all social backgrounds. And every morning, before going to the office, Diego still stopped at the coffee shop on the ground floor, now run by Rafaela as a professional training center for disadvantaged youth, to have his latte and remember how true love knows no barriers when it finds enough courage to fight for itself. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Diego and Rafaela has moved you as much as it has moved us to tell it. This journey about love that transcends social differences and the courage to fight for what really matters reminds us that the most difficult obstacles can become the foundations of the strongest loves. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally touching stories about relationships that defy conventions and people who choose courage over fear. Find this careful selection by clicking here on the side. If you enjoyed this story of love and overcoming obstacles, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. It helps us continue bringing you narratives that celebrate the complexity and beauty of human relationships. Every day we share unique stories that explore the mazes of the heart and the surprises that life holds for us. Don't miss our next content, and we look forward to seeing you in the comments to share your own stories of love that have overcome all odds.